I'm Erica Whitaker. I'm the head of Market Access Europe for UCB Pharma. And I apologize, I will give neither the introduction nor the talk in Greek. But the translation seems really good, at least going from Greek to English. Okay. So what I'd like to do, as Nico said, is give my thoughts on what we can do when resources are scarce. So right now we're in a situation where there are a number of challenging events that are hitting us at the same time. And first of all, is that working? Good. You can see that there's a trend of an aging population, and of course that's putting stress on healthcare budgets. At the same time, as this Economist cover shows for our host nation here, none of us in Europe has really recovered from the European financial crisis, and so governments just simply don't have the funds to keep on paying for increasing levels of healthcare spending. So what we need to do in these challenging times is partnership, and you heard some of that from the previous speaker, Eric. And we really need to work together, pharma companies and health authorities, to allow patients to get access to drugs that are going to improve their lives. And one of the options, and I'm going to spend the rest of my talk focusing on, are risk-sharing agreements. And you heard from Nikos, you saw his slide on some examples in the UK. And the attractive thing about these sorts of agreements is that they create value for patients, for payers, and for pharma companies. The patient value is that the patient gets access to medicines that can help them get back to normal, to improve their lives. For the payer, for health authorities, they're seen as an investment to improve the health of a particular patient population. These agreements, depending on how they're structured, can also reduce wastage in the system. Again, a critical thing when we're trying to conserve budgets. And for us pharma companies, as I'm sure Eric will agree, we'd like to get a fair return on our significant investment in drug research and development. It's not an easy task. And also, under these agreements, because we really believe in our drugs, we're willing to take the risk and share that risk because we know our drugs will help patients. So when you think about risk-sharing agreements, they actually come under many different names up here, but they can really be divided into two main types of agreement. First of all, financially based agreements where you have a cost volume type of agreement, where rebates are added once drug sales or patient days reach a certain limit, or caps on the utilization or costs of a drug. Then you've got health outcomes-based agreements, and these involve pay-for-performance type of schemes, and also outcome guarantees, where the pharma company is willing to take on the risk of treatment failure. Now, as we head towards the right of this diagram, towards the more health outcomes-based agreements, there's increased win-win here for both pharma, patients, and payers. Now, these sorts of agreements you saw on that slide, a long list from the UK in Nico's presentation, these sort of agreements are actually more prevalent than you might think across many countries in Europe. So I'm just going to give you some examples of these. And first of all, the financially based agreements or cost capping. And you heard Nikos talk about the challenges of oncology treatments because of the expense. And here are some agreements where, many of them for oncology, they've agreed to cap the cost, and often based around very good clinical rationale. So if you look at Lucentis to treat AMD, there's clinical data showing that the majority of patients have vision that's stabilized after 14 shots, and a large proportion of them actually have their vision improved. So the cost is capped at 14 shots, and if a patient needs more, Novartis will pay for it. Yondelis, the drug for sarcoma. Again, this is capped in the UK at 5 cycles, and PharmaMar pays for the additional treatment if the patient needs it. And then more simplistically, Iressa for non-small cell lung cancer in the UK, it's applied at a flat cost no matter how long the treatment is for. And here's some more. So the ones that I really like, the health outcomes-based agreements. So this is a really interesting one that I found out about. It took place in a couple of sick funds in Germany, where Aclastas and osteoporosis treatment involves a single annual injection. And what Novartis agreed with these sick funds was that following this injection, the sick fund would pay for the injection for the osteoporosis patients, but for the next 12 months following that injection, if that patient had any fracture, okay, not just an osteoporosis fracture, but any fracture, like they broke their nose from walking into the kitchen door or something, Novartis would pay for the treatment, all of the treatment, hospitalization costs, nursing care for that patient if they suffered a fracture, because Novartis believed so much in the value that its drug was bringing. And then Pfizer's Lipitor, this drug, they did a deal with the UK that if the treatment population didn't improve the level of LDL cholesterol to the particular target, that Pfizer would refund all the costs if at least 80% of those patients didn't achieve the target. And then this is a really interesting one, a future rebate scheme for Votrient by GSK. This drug, if they had a straight rebate agreed with the UK, which is pretty much what the UK likes to agree now with companies. But in addition, depending on the results of a future head-to-head trial against the market leader Sutent, if those trial results were not successful for Votrient, then GSK agreed to pay an additional rebate to the UK government. So again, that's pretty innovative. And then now more recently, Sovaldi, you've heard a lot about this drug. Well, just a few weeks ago, they did a deal with the French government, and that if patients are not fully cured, any patient who's not fully cured, Gilead will refund the entire cost of that patient's therapy to the French government. And then if we look at pay for performance, what I like about the concept of pay for performance is that in just about every market we're involved in where there's buying and selling of goods and services, you expect that what you purchase is going to work for you and provide a benefit. And so that's what these agreements are based on. And the first ever pay for performance agreement that I'm certainly aware of is for the cancer drug Velcade, which opened the door to these sorts of agreements in the UK, where the UK NICE would pay for the full treatment cost, but only if patients have had a partial or complete response to the treatment. And then Cimzia, which is one of our products, it's an anti-TNF biologic for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and other immunological disorders. We've got some pretty robust data that show that at 12 weeks, we can predict whether a patient will have a long-term response or not to the treatment. That's long-term, a year or more. So at 12 weeks, a decision can be made as to whether this drug is working or not. And so in a number of European countries, and it's been publicized in Spain and in the UK, we are involved in schemes whereby the costs of the drug are not paid for until the patient responds, only for patients who respond at 12 weeks. And in some countries, the cost of the 12 weeks of the treatment is refunded if the patient doesn't respond. So these are some examples of what has been done, but I think we can still be a lot more innovative on how we address these types of schemes. And I thought I would give Sovaldi as an example, because this has been a very emotive example that I'm sure we've all heard about and seen in the press. And in the US, Gilead's Sovaldi it's priced at $84,000 for a 12-week course of treatment. Now, that's very expensive, but this is an amazing drug. It offers nearly a 100% cure rate for patients infected with the hepatitis C virus. And if you look at it in some ways, in some analyses, Sovaldi is extremely cost effective because that $84,000 cost is only a fraction of the long-term treatment costs for HCV-infected patients. However, this price has caused a complete outrage in the US and in Europe because payers have been concerned that there are hundreds of thousands of HCV patients and worried that at this cost, it's going to completely bankrupt their budgets. So in the US press, for example, we've seen payers using phrases like this: grossly excessive prices, Gilead's using their monopoly to price gouge. There's even a spoof on their logo and tagline saying, $1,000 a tablet. Well, it's cheaper than a new liver. And these aren't the types of relationships you want to build with your customers, are they? So I've been thinking about this, and there have been some ideas, I think, that were in the press about gene therapy treatments around an annuity model. And I was thinking, well, why, when we're thinking about drugs like Sovaldi or expensive drugs, that their value is in the long-term cost savings and the long-term benefit. Why don't we think about something like an annuity model, where you'd provide, a decent upfront payment, again, to pay a portion of those R&D costs that we sustain in the pharma industry, but then having annual payments spread over a longer period of time, and the time at which you're reaping those cost benefits. And that would make it easier on healthcare budgets, and also it would still give the pharma companies some payback. So I think we have to continue to look at models that are not just good on our side for pharma, but also really understanding the needs of the health authorities and what they need to keep their own costs under control. So as you've seen in my talk, there are a lot of ways that we can work together to make sure that patients get access to innovative drugs. And after all, patients at the center of what we do, and this is what we like to say at our company, that everything we do starts with a simple question: how will this make a difference to the lives of people with severe diseases? Okay, ευχαριστώ.